Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is August 27th, 2024, and let's get to the news and map updates happening in Ukraine and Russia, shall we? So, I first wanted to talk about some great announcements over the weekend. On Independence Day, Zelensky announced that Ukraine has started production of a brand new weapon called the Palyannitsa. And this is a word that the Russians have a lot of trouble spelling. So they won't have the choice but to learn it, because this is a very, from what it looks like, a very destructive weapon that is really going to help the Ukrainians destroy far more military airfields, ammunition depots, and other very vital buildings within Russia. And why is that? So the Palyannitsa is a long-range jet-powered attack drone / missile. The specs are classified here, so we don't yet know what the range is, what the warhead it carries, what kind of warhead it carries. But what we know is that it's far more agile, mobile, and faster. It definitely will have a long range. It will have to match what the current UAVs that Ukraine is producing have in terms of range. We know that some of these UAVs have managed to go up to 1,200 kilometers within Russian territory, so we can only hope that this is the same. This is the case for this Palyannitsa. And the warhead is classified. Now, some are saying that it has about a 20 kilo, 30 kilo fragmentation warhead. It could be higher, could be smaller, but as long as it packs a punch, I'm sure that this will really wreak havoc in Russia. Additionally, today, Zelensky also announced during his press conference that Ukraine has also managed to start mass producing the Grim 2 ballistic missiles. I've talked about this ballistic in the past in several videos, but there was no real announcement of Ukraine really confirming its mass production. But now it appears that they have managed to find a way to start producing them in large quantities. And just to remind my viewers of the specs of this ballistic missile, which can also be converted into cruise missile, is that it has a 500 to 700 kilometer range. It also has a very large warhead of 480 kilos, so it packs a very big punch, similar to the bomb that the Russians are currently dropping in Ukraine, the FEB 500. So this is a really big announcement by the Zelensky administration. I can only hope that in the next few weeks, months, Ukraine will be able to start using them effectively against Russian targets within Russian territory. And let's face it, Ukraine absolutely needs to become more independent with its weapon production, especially with what we've been seeing the last 2.5 years with the West essentially telling us they're not even trying to hide anymore, that they don't want Ukraine's full victory. They're fully fine with a drip type of help to Ukraine, and they don't want a full collapse of Russia. And they know that if they were to give the green light to Ukraine to use the ATACMS, Storm Shadow, Scalps, and also utilizing their air defense systems and even their own jet fighters in Poland, Romania, Bulgaria to shoot down Russian cruise missiles, this will bring the collapse of Russia much faster. But they don't want that. And so unfortunately, Ukraine, I guess the silver lining behind this is that Ukraine gets to and is forced to start thinking about becoming independent and utilizing its weapons just the way it wants to. So I guess that's the silver lining behind that. And so speaking of this Western de-escalation policy, you can see that Ukraine is still trying to convince the United States to allow them to use the ATACMS and other long-range missiles and weaponry against Russia on Russian territory. And so it's going to present, apparently, when the defense minister of Ukraine, Rustem Umerov, and also Andriy Yermak will visit Washington next few weeks or this week. They'll try to convince the Biden administration of allowing the Ukrainians to hit certain targets within Russia by providing them a list of targets, which I think is a perfect compromise, right, to the fear of escalation that the US and NATO have right now. And Ukraine essentially gets to limit its attacks on Russian soil by maximizing the impact on Russia's military operational capabilities, right? And especially the military airfields we know that are really important for Russia. Most of them are within the long-range missile range from Ukraine. And so I think that Ukraine will likely try to highlight the most important airfields that Russia is currently using to bomb Ukrainian cities and Ukrainian positions and continue terrorizing the Ukrainian population. And again, like the term that we've been using in the past is that Ukraine needs to be able to eliminate the archer, not the arrow. And that's really important. By destroying the jet fighters, the bombers, the military airfields, the ammunition depots, Ukraine is essentially limiting the amount of damage that Russia can do on Ukrainian soil. And we know that over the weekend as well, or yesterday, I should say, Russia launched one of the biggest, largest missile attack on Ukraine. Unfortunately, they were able to hit some targets, civilian buildings, hydroelectrical power dam. And so again, you know, Ukraine is only trying right now, can only intercept the arrow, but not the archer. So it's absolutely important that Ukraine gets to have the chance to destroy Russian military airfields that are just spreading terror within Ukraine. And last but not least, let's talk about as well, well, knowing that Russia would certainly resume its missile campaign on during the winter of this year and next year. And the best proof is that end of August, we're now heading into fall, and Russia yesterday launched one of its largest missile attack and destroyed effectively some very important institutions and buildings within Ukraine. So we know that Russia definitely sending out a message that they're planning to continue with their terrorist operations in Ukraine. And so Ukraine needs to find solutions to produce energy, because we know that there's going to be definitely electricity shortages during the winter as the utilization will increase. And so Ukraine confirmed today that they will resume construction of an unfinished nuclear power plant in Cherkasy. So this is the Cheherin plant. And so essentially Ukraine is planning to start construction again, rebuild these nuclear power plants. And there's another one that they're actually trying to expand, which is in Khmelnytsky. So this is the Khmelnytsky power plant, where they start building new reactors, the new reactor unit 5 and 6, which will help prevent Ukraine with power outages following Russian attacks, which will inevitably continue to happen. And certainly this is much more safer, because we know that Russia will not go after nuclear power plants the same way as Ukraine will not go after the Russian power plants, because this will by default directly impact them. Imagine if they were to destroy a nuclear power plant in Khmelnytsky or elsewhere in Ukraine. I believe there is another one in Rivne, if I remember correctly. Then this will, and even the Enerhodar one, they might do as much blackmail as they want, but they know the impacts and the negative consequences of destroying a nuclear power plant. I mean, it's the amount of destruction it can also bring to Russia is massive. So with that in mind, we need to also remember that Ukraine absolutely needs to get as many air defense systems as possible from the West to protect its other electrical generating power facilities. That's really important. And certainly the Russians might be eyeing this Cheherin plant during its construction phase to try to sabotage it. So we need to definitely continue helping the Ukrainians and giving them valuable air defense systems, such as the Patriots, the ARST systems. There's hundreds of them available. Now, I wanted to go over the map because there is a few things that we need to discuss. And so let me go over the map. So first I want to talk about the Pokrovsk situation, which is worsening for the Ukrainians, unfortunately. We're seeing that right now, the Russians are continuously pushing. They're capable of gaining more territory. And I've talked about in my previous video on Friday that I'm anticipating a very large battle right now at the outskirts of Pokrovsk by the beginning of September. And I have no doubt that the Russians will be able to consolidate and take all of this area before they start attacking Pokrovsk. You're seeing that the Ukrainians right now, unfortunately, are withdrawing. They see there's no point, from what I understand, for them to try to hold these small villages and settlements. They're really betting on a hard defense of Pokrovsk. At least that's what I'm hoping for. And as I've said, I am pretty confident that Ukraine will be able to hold out Pokrovsk for a few months, the worst case scenario, because Ukraine does really well in defending large cities. Example like Mariupol, where Ukraine only had about 3,000 soldiers, and they managed to defend Mariupol for about 3 months without any resupply missions from the Ukrainian side. A few of them were through helicopters, but that wasn't enough. And then we know about Bakhmut, about Severodonetsk, where Ukraine was able to also hold for several months. And that was during the peak of the Russian military, where they had a lot of artillery systems, where they had a lot more manpower, a lot more armored vehicles, a lot more capabilities. And Russia's definitely losing a lot here. This is 6 months worth of progress. And we know that they've paid an enormous amount to capture this entire area after Avdiivka. So I think that this is going to be a very difficult battle for the Ukrainians, but a far more difficult one for the Russians. We know that the numbers in terms of losses increase a lot higher to the advantage of the Ukrainian military once Russia starts attacking a very large city like Pokrovsk, Bakhmut, Mariupol, where sometimes the ratio goes 8-1, 7-1 in the advantage of Ukraine. So unfortunately, yes, Russia will continue gaining ground, and probably in early September, the first weeks of September, we will see Russia start fighting at the outskirts of Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. The situation is the same here in New York and Toretsk. The Russians are at the outskirts of those two cities. Battles are still ongoing. You can see that the entire kind of center of New York is kind of a gray area. And the same for Toretsk, as the Russians try to get close to this city. It's really important that Ukraine holds out to Toretsk, because afterwards, you know, the Russians have an open, not an open, road to Konstantinivka, but it will be far easier afterwards for the Russians to continue pushing because there's only small villages afterwards. So Toretsk will be another very big battle. So this is the main punch by the Russians, really, right now, as we're seeing between Chasiv Yar and Pokrovsk. I should even go all the way up to Vuhledar. This is where the Russians are really throwing everything that they can. The last few months, this is their main punch. And elsewhere, we're not seeing the Russians really advancing. So we see that they can only really conduct a massive offensive in one direction. And at the same time, we know that the Ukrainians have their own offensive in Kursk, which is also very successful for the Ukrainians. And so it's basically kind of this, it's balancing itself out, the current front line, where the Ukrainians have managed to regain or occupy over 1,300 square kilometers of territory in less than 3 weeks. And this is the amount of territory and time, basically, for the Russians. It took them about 6 to 8 months to take this entire area. So it really showcases to you that the losses for the Russians are far greater here. And so Ukraine could still, in my opinion, hold out effectively in Pokrovsk and Mirnograd by waiting until the fall and early winter, when it's going to be far more difficult for the Russians to start maneuvering here quickly and hide because of foliage and things like that. So I think that Ukraine will be able to hold out to Pokrovsk. It's just, I'm hoping that this is going to be on the long term, the same way like Vuhledar. So you guys can let me know what you think in the comment section. Additionally, one last update I wanted to give you guys is that in the direction of Belarus, our favorite potato head decided to again listen to Putin and move some of his troops at the border with Ukraine. So I'm talking about Belarus moving troops close to the border with Ukraine, because this is obviously something that was requested by Putin. Putin is fearful, and he wants to again send a signal that we can invade the north at any time. Now, do we believe that actually Belarus and Russia might start a new operation in Ukraine? This is always a possibility, but I highly doubt that they will go ahead with this. And I think Lukashenko, even during Independence Day, actually Belarus sent out basically a congratulatory message to Ukraine, basically congratulating Ukraine with their Independence Day. So I think that this is Lukashenko's way of sending a message by saying, hey, like, I'm just doing what Putin is telling me, but if anything happens, I'm going to go with the West. So I don't think that Lukashenko will go ahead with some sort of offensive unless he's really, really pressured by Putin. And this is always a possibility. But this is something to look out for. But again, there's pretty much 95% chance that Belarus is just doing this as a bluff. So that's pretty much the update for today, guys. The situation remains difficult in Pokrovsk, but for the Russians, it is currently very difficult in Kursk, and they continue losing territory, and Ukraine continues advancing on the northwestern side of Sudzha, here in the Glushkov district, the district that we've talked about in the last few videos, that Ukraine has completely cut off, and there is a few hundred Russian soldiers stuck here, and Ukraine continuously advances here, gathers more forces, and then occupies small settlements. So as I've mentioned previously, Ukraine will probably consolidate this area and try to hold it and try to essentially track as many Russian forces as possible. So that's the video update for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed my video. Please, if you enjoy my content, please subscribe to my channel, like my video, and leave me a comment about your opinions. So thank you so much, and Slava Ukraini.